Good afternoon, and welcome to the Graduate Student Council's panel discussion on exploring non-academic job opportunities. My name is Hannah Shear, and I'm the Graduate Student Council President here at K-State. I'm also a fourth-year PhD student in agricultural economics. So I just want to thank you guys for attending our second professional development event this year, and remind you that participation in this event can count towards earning the Graduate Student Council Professional Development Certificate. So to earn credit, you must complete the feedback survey that will be sent to you guys after this event, probably about a week after the conclusion of this event, you should get that survey. So today we have an amazing panel on exploring job opportunities outside academia, where professionals from government, industry, and nonprofit sectors will discuss their career experiences, share guidance on how to seek out non-academic job opportunities, and answer questions from our graduate students. So a quick rundown on the format of how we're going to do this. It's always awkward to do these things via Zoom, so we're going to try to just go with the flow. So first, we'll take a few minutes for our panelists to briefly introduce themselves and tell us a little bit about their background and what they're doing in the industry. And then I'll kind of start the conversation by asking some of the questions that have been submitted previously by graduate students, just to help get things, break that ice, because it's always awkward silence when we open the floor for questions. So while we're kind of running through some of those first couple of questions and you guys start to feel more comfortable asking questions, you can do it one of two ways. You can simply drop your question in the chat and I will call on you, and you can introduce yourself, tell everyone your name, your program, and then ask your question. If you don't want to read it, you can just ask me in the chat to read the question for you. Or if you don't want to type out your long, confusing question, but you want to ask it, in the participants section in the Zoom applications at the bottom of your screen, you should be able to raise your hand digitally, and I will do my best to try to call on you guys in order as they appear. But I'm managing lots of things from this side, so I can't promise, but we should be able to get to everyone's questions. So if anyone has any questions about how this is going to work, again, you can just drop it in the chat and we should be good to go. So does anyone have any questions? All right, nothing's popped up in the chat yet, so we'll go ahead and get started with the panel introductions. So we're going to ask our panelists to introduce a little bit about their educational and professional background in about 3 to 5 minutes. So we'll start with Vista Fletcher.
All right, good afternoon. I hope everyone's doing okay. I'm really excited to be here with you today. It's always a pleasure to do things with my alma mater, K-State. So a little bit about me. I am from a little town in Florida called Mulberry. Not sure if any of you ever heard of it, not Mayberry, Mulberry. So when I finished high school, I ventured to Florida State University. So I graduated in a class of about 100 students and then went to a university with about over 20,000 students. But went to Florida State, got my bachelor's degree and master's degree in food and nutrition. And luckily, Florida State had what they call an AP4 program. So I was able to get my master's degree and internship experience needed to sit for the RD exam. So I am also a registered dietitian. So after leaving Kansas State, I went to Las Vegas, where I worked as a nutrition consultant for the Department of Education. And once I left Nevada, I went back to Florida and worked for Orange County Public Schools as an administrator or supervisor. So worked with about 35 of our schools there. Great experience doing training and doing a lot of personnel matters. So I was in Orlando, was really happy with what I was doing. I was from Florida, so was happy staying there. And someone said, there's an opportunity in Richmond for a food service director. You should really consider going there. And in my mind, I was thinking, I don't think so. But, you know, I was always taught to challenge myself and go after opportunities. So went to Richmond, was there for 3 years, really enjoyed what I was doing, met my husband there, was really happy. And then I got another call saying, hey, there's an opportunity in Memphis. They're looking for a food service director there. You know, we think you might be a good fit. You know, would you consider applying? When I was in Richmond, we had about a $10 million budget. In Memphis, it was about a $55 million budget, so a much bigger operation. went to Memphis and did that, and great team. We did some really positive things there. And after leaving Memphis, I am now at the United States Department of Agriculture, Food and Nutrition Service. It'll be 10 years in about a week that I've been here, and it's been great to take that experience from the local and state levels and apply it here. But since being at USDA, I've served as a branch chief for schools and food distribution programs. I've also served as the WIC director for the region, and now I'm the regional director for special nutrition programs. So that covers WIC and all of our child nutrition programs. So love our work, love our mission of making sure that, you know, children and low-income families are able to have access to nutritious meals. So, you know, my whole career has been in child nutrition programs, again, at the state, local, and federal level. So absolutely love what I do.
Awesome, thank you. We can tell that you love what you do because you smiled the whole time we were telling us about it. So thank you.
Thank
All
you.
right, we'll now have Mary Gregoire tell us a little bit about her background and her experience in industry. Oh, I think you're still muted. After, yep.
Thank you. Yes, good afternoon, everyone. I'm very pleased to be able to be here and be part of this panel this afternoon. I'm from North Dakota originally, was born and raised on a farm there. Did my undergraduate degree in dietetics at North Dakota State University, and then stayed on and did my master's. At that point, dietetics had an option where you could do a master's and a 6-month work experience to be able to then sit for the exam. And I was working actually as a food production supervisor at the local hospital. And so they set up a work experience for me. So I am a registered dietitian as well. And then we moved, my husband is a pharmacist, and we moved to Northwest Indiana. And I started my career after my master's degree as director of operations would be my career path. And while I was there, I was convinced to teach a food sanitation class at the local university. And I started doing that. And then I had dietetics students who had interest in shadowing and getting some work experience that would come to my hospital, and I would work and mentor with them. And I really enjoyed that work. And so decided to go back to school to get my doctorate. So K-State in food service management. And after finishing that, I then thought my career would be academics. And so my first position out of my doctorate was an academic position. It was a typical faculty position where I taught, did research, service, those types of things. And from there, I found I really enjoyed doing research. And so then was recruited to a position with an entity called the National Food Service Management Institute. It's now the Institute for Child Nutrition, that was housed at the University of Southern Mississippi. The research division was housed there. And I was the associate director for research, and so did research for a few years, but found I really missed operations. And so I then took a position, and we moved to the Chicago area, and I was the associate food service director and the internship director at Rush University. Well, at that point, it was called Rush Presbyterian St. Luke's Medical Center. We were there several years, and I was recruited to a department head position at Iowa State. So we moved to Ames, Iowa, and we were in Ames a number of years, and I was a department head there. And then the person who had been the director of food nutrition services at Rush was looking to retire. And so I was recruited back to Rush. And I went back as the director of food nutrition services on the operations side. And then I was also the chair of clinical nutrition on the academic side. Rush was a really neat position because it allowed me to do both, to have my hand in operations and all the fun and excitement that goes with operations, but also to be able to work with graduate students and direct research. And then my last position then was as the executive director for the Accreditation Council for Education in Nutrition and Dietetics. That is the entity that accredits all nutrition and dietetics programs across the country. We have about 600 programs. And I just recently retired, so I am now officially retired. So I've had positions, as you can see, both on the academic side as well as on the non-academic side, and both have, well, all of my positions I've really found, have really enjoyed and been able to do a lot of fun things with a lot of great people. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, thank you for coming out of retirement for us for this panel. We appreciate that. All right, we'll move to Dr. Messina.
Hi, thank you for the invitation and be part of the panel. My story is less interesting than the Dr. Fletcher and Gregoire. I'm from Argentina, or at least I was born in Argentina. I studied there agronomy first, and I did a master's in agriculture and crop science, after which I decided that I really want to work with a certain professor in the US. So that's an important part of the story. I look for working with certain individuals which I thought they were the ones that would help me understand and have impact throughout my career. So I moved to the US. I don't know, many of you probably relate to this story, probably with a backpack, and that's about it. So I started grad school with an assistantship, and I did my PhD at the University of Florida. Since then, Corteva AgriScience recruited me there, and the rest is history. The last 15 years, I've been working in industry. So as you can see, my path was much shorter. I still have a couple of years to go, but certainly less rich. I'm quite passionate, that's why I still at Corteva AgriScience. Part of the story why I decided to go to industry, it was at the time, funding agencies were not interested in some of the research I was interested in, and Corteva was. So that created an opportunity to work with other people I really wanted to work, Dr. Mark Cooper, and some individuals from the University of Queensland, Australia. After that, I took a number of roles in industry. I started in the information management, if you will, think about more the computer science, that sort of connection between biology and agriculture and computer science. Then I moved into research. The same theme was around the use of mathematics to predict how plants grow and develop. All those models were applied to develop the first cohort of maize, drought-tolerant maize, which is, you probably see it grown in Kansas. The great satisfaction there is that we developed a number of technologies which we published, because we can have impact not only by creating the product and helping farmers, but also taking many of these technologies to other crops. So thanks for the grant that FFR gave to the Kansas State University. We are working with Kansas State to take a lot of the technologies we develop in industry and transfer a lot of that knowledge that could be applied to other crops, minor crops in particular. And what we did for yield and standability and drought tolerance, there's nothing that prevents you to apply it to nutrition, which I think is once you sort of work out and break the barrier of, all right, now we can produce enough, then your next horizon is, all right, let's start making a better and more nutritious crops. So that's the next horizon, and that's how you sort of start building your career. The other path and opportunity that brought Corteva to me is once we demonstrate you can apply these technologies to drought, there's some other serious problems with the environment. So now the next horizon becomes not only nutritious crops, but a healthier environment. We can't really have healthy people with toxic environments and no food. So everything is one. Think about the one health. That's kind of the way we think. So you need a healthy environment, health food, and enough food. And that's what the breeding enable us to do. So we are looking into applying these technologies to minimize the risk of unintended contamination. Growers do their best, but environment is stochastic, so they never know when they're going to dump extra nitrogen and cause an environmental problem. So what are the capacity, what are the possibilities that we have in our hands to help them produce more food, better food, with a much smaller environmental footprint? And that's a little bit more my story. I have the privilege really to work in industry. Today I have a team that you will find individuals from pretty much all over the world, including Americans. And it's that sort of a diversity of thoughts and life histories that I think it will create this working environment that help us innovate our way out of some of these wicked problems. Like, as I said, nitrogen pollution, environmental pollution, food production or famine, and the effects of the environment on food production. So that's a little bit my story. Why I end up in industry, I think as in evolution is chance and opportunity.
Awesome. Well, thank you for sharing that with us. I'm seeing some patterns: food, nutrition, sustainability, and apparently Florida are common patterns here. All right, we'll close out our introductions with Dr. Thurston.
Okay, well, thanks. Good afternoon, everybody. So there's some similarities, but I'm going to bring the Southwest into this conversation. So I wasn't born in Arizona, but I grew up in Arizona, and I actually got all three of my degrees. I got a bachelor's, master's, and PhD at University of Arizona. My area of expertise is in environmental microbiology, really focused on water quality. And so, you know, one of the things I'd like to say is in graduate school, I was very fortunate to study under someone who had a very broad research program. And so I was exposed to many different kinds of research teams. So those multidisciplinary opportunities, I think, were very valuable to me in being successful and in getting a job out of graduate school. So I'll just fast forward to graduating from graduating with my PhD. And I had several opportunities, and I think there was a real specific question that was to me that I think is going to come up later, but I can probably answer it now. Someone asked and wanted to know why I chose not to go into academia and instead stayed with the United States Department of Agriculture for most of my career until now. So what happened for me is I had several opportunities upon graduation. Two were postdocs, and one was a permanent full-time position as a Category 1 scientist at the Agriculture Research Service. Now, not to say one of those postdocs was really hard for me to turn down because I'm an environmental microbiologist, and one of the positions was to be a postdoc at the Centers for Disease Control. So I had a lot of sleepless nights making that decision, but I made the right decision for me and my family. A little bit of background on me, it's a little bit personal, but I think it's going to explain a lot regarding my particular path. I was a single parent in graduate school. And so for me, that decision to go to USDA, even though, I think most microbiologists' dream is to work at the CDC, and I've been working in the environmental virology laboratory, which would have been fantastic, working on some of the viruses we hear about today, right? So, noroviruses actually was going to be the work that I was going to be doing there. But, as a single parent, and so the enticement of having a permanent full-time position at the USDA was quite fantastic. The other thing is that job offered me the best of both worlds. So again, getting back to whomever asked the question about why I chose not to go to academia, as an agriculture research service scientist, many are located right on campus at land-grant institutions. So I went to Lincoln, Nebraska. I was on campus at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln on the East Campus, if you're familiar with that campus. My lab was right in the same building as all my colleagues who were UNL faculty. I was adjunct faculty. I took on graduate students. I had undergraduate students working in my lab. But I was a federal scientist, so really I had the best of both worlds. So that's why I chose to go to USDA as the first step in my career. From there, so I think I heard Dr. Fletcher say she likes to be challenged. I'm one of those people too. I don't sit still for very long. So I stayed in that position, and I love my job, by the way. And if anyone wants to talk about career opportunities at Agriculture Research Service, I have nothing but good things to say, and we can talk about that later if you have specific questions. But I got a little antsy in my position. Some things happened in my personal life. I was just ready for a change. I had the good opportunity, and this is something that I think you all need to think about doing and volunteering for, is being a reviewer on a grant panel. So I had the opportunity to be a reviewer at the time. You probably all heard of the National Institute of Food and Agriculture. They used to be, the agency used to be called CSREES, and I can't for the life of me remember what all the E's are for. But anyway, so I served on a grant panel. And I said, this is really interesting. I got to know the national program leader that led that panel, asked her a lot of questions, still went back to my job at ARS, was there for another year. They called me back again and said, hey, would you participate again on the same program? So I did. And then I asked a lot more questions about what it was like to work in Washington, D.C. and provide leadership over science policy. And boy, that really sounded exciting to me. So it just happened to be a position came available. I think it was the very next year. And so I put my hat in the ring, and fortunate for me, I was chosen to move to Washington, D.C. And my first job at the National Institute of Food and Agriculture, so that's the new name of the agency that I served as a reviewer for. I was a national program leader for food safety. I did that for about 5 years. I got antsy again and talked to leadership at NIFA about what kind of opportunities I had. And it just turned out that they were getting ready to develop a new position. And this was a science policy position, but it was over the entire portfolio for the agency. And that was the last job I had before coming to K-State. And you know, if you want to talk about science policy in that last job, I absolutely loved it. It really broadened my knowledge about agricultural science, not just in that little sliver of food safety or water quality, but really provided me very broad knowledge, which I think has really helped me coming here to K-State. So I've been at K-State for a year. I love that I'm back in academia. And I remember, I feel like I was in academia when I was at ARS because I was on campus there at UNL. I've been here a year. One question a lot of people like to ask me is, why did you leave USDA? I was at USDA for 18 years. I said, because you know what, and this is the honest to goodness truth, I really wanted to get back where the impacts are. So I'm closer to the ground where the impacts are occurring. We do the research here. I work very closely with faculty here that are doing all the exciting work that's being funded by the science agencies. And you know what? One of the very best things that I've ever done in my career is to mentor students, especially graduate students. There's nothing more rewarding than seeing you all be successful. And so that was a major decision, a major thought that I had and played into my decision in coming to K-State. So I'm glad to be here, and I'm really looking forward to all your good questions.
Awesome. Well, thank you. You did take the wind out of our next question, but that's cool because we'll count it as you already answered it. So again, if you guys want to start dropping any questions you have in the chat, I am going to go ahead with our next question though, and that is, what influenced your decision to pursue a career outside of academia? So a little bit of, you guys touched on this a little bit, but I think just specifically what influenced you to pursue that job outside academia? We'll start with Dr. Fletcher.
Okay, sure. And you know, I think during my introduction, I didn't mention that I got my doctorate degree at Kansas State University. I think I skipped that part, so just want to make sure Dr. Shanklin knows that I shared that information, my major professor. So can't forget that important piece of information. But for me, like I mentioned before, I've just always had a passion for child nutrition and food service management. I remember being like in high school, and one of my cousins was a food service director at a university, and that really caught my interest. And also as a child, I absolutely loved school lunch. I should be like the poster child for school lunch. I just really loved it, and it was important to me. So it was interesting when I was graduating from high school, the cafeteria staff in the district that I worked in raised $500 to give a scholarship to a student who was interested in pursuing a career in food service or nutrition. So I got their first ever scholarship. And so the food service director was Marcia Smith in Polk County. I'm sure those in food service know her. So when I finished my degree in dietetics and would see her at conferences, it was always so rewarding to say, like, thank you, like you poured into me, and I'm doing this now. So just a love for what I do from the beginning was really important to me. And I remember getting ready to graduate from Kansas State University and talking to my professors about next steps. And, you know, the thought was, you know, kind of, I would go into higher education, but my heart was just really tugging at, you know, going into the field and really making a difference in the lives of children. So I just think it's where I'm supposed to be in the past and right now, but I think, you know, academia is certainly in my future somewhere. So.
Awesome, thank you. I also love school lunches, so. All right, how about you, Dr. Gregoire?
I think it was, as you know, several of the panelists have talked about, you know, you go to positions that just look like they'll be of interest, will challenge you, will be something new and exciting to work with. And so I think that was, you know, what prompted. I'd started in operations, and I worked in academia a while. I missed operations, which is what drove me back twice throughout my career back into operations. I think it's a whole different pace within, and Dr. Fletcher can sure speak to that, having worked in school food service, but hospital food service in a very similar way. No 2 days are the same. There's always new things to be solved. I really enjoy that sort of management, leadership, visioning, coming up with new ways to do things. Sustainability, I know, has been mentioned by other panelists. I was a big part of, when I was at Rush, I headed up what we called our green team at that point, but was very involved as we designed our new hospital bed tower that ended up earning LEED Gold status, which we were very excited about. But so I think there was just a lot of different things to be involved with. That my last position as the executive director at the Accreditation Council was really because it provided me the opportunity to really help shape the future of dietetic education. We were at a really sort of pivotal point, I think, in the profession. And so while I was there, we developed the standards for master's level education. And so it was a way to, I think, end my career in trying to set forth something that would then have an influence for years to come in how future dietitians were prepared.
Awesome, thank you. Dr. Messina, do you have anything you'd like to add?
I will emphasize what it was said about shape the future and look for the opportunities, right? You have an idea of where you're heading and what would you like to have an impact, and the institutions are secondary to the opportunities that you have to have that impact and shape the future. And as I mentioned, in my case, it could be at times in your career, it could be people. Some other cases could be funding or other institutions like the private sector. The alignment in thoughts and interest to move in certain, move science and technology in certain directions is not in academia. So that's the path you choose to take that challenge and shape the future. I would say, remember that piece from Dr. Gregoire, shape the future. Go there, go for the mess.
Awesome. All right, well, we will move on to our next question, which kind of builds a little bit off what you guys were just discussing, because I think what I'm hearing is that it's people and the challenge in the industry that kind of attracted you guys there. So what skills, experiences, or resources helped you make the transition to your non-academic careers? So what skills, experiences, or resources helped you make the transition? And we'll start with Dr. Thurston, since we kind of did it reverse last time.
Sorry, my computer just like shut off and shut back on, so I'm going to move you back over to this computer. Okay, so it was number 5 you're on, is that right?
Did we send you the questions? On my sheet, it's number 3.
Oh, and number 3. So I think I might have answered this a little bit.
Yeah.
This is how did you decide on your first job?
Oh, our questions are misnumbered. So this one's just skills, experiences, or resources that helped you transition to your non-academic job.
Okay, yeah, that's number 5 on mine. Yeah, okay. So, so I mentioned a little bit about being on working in large teams. I had that opportunity at University of Arizona. You know, I worked in a lab, and I'm not exaggerating to tell you that there were times during actually I started in that lab as an undergrad, and that's how I decided that I want to stay for my graduate degree. But during that time, that from my undergrad all the way through to my PhD, we had times where we had over 20, and I'm not exaggerating, over 20 graduate students in that lab. So you can imagine the breadth of research that was going on in that lab, and the very unique teams that were put together, you know, with, like, for example, with engineering department, with the agronomy, with other folks. So I think getting team experience, getting leadership, you know, research leadership, if that's what you're doing, if you're doing leadership, if you're doing research, being able to actually lead your own research program in a team environment was incredibly useful to me. Another is working again in those multidisciplinary teams, being able to talk the same talk and being able to communicate with people in other fields is incredibly important, at least in my experience. And resources that help me. Well, you know, people, you know, your major advisor and the networking and the people your major advisor and your student colleagues introduce you to, those may lead to very, very wonderful opportunities. And so expanding your networks, going to these professional meetings, making sure you're meeting people, I think those are probably some of the biggest things that helped me and continue to help me in my career.
Awesome. Thank you. And I just got the updated list with the corrected numbers for questions, so no more confusions. Okay, Dr. Gregoire, do you have anything to add on skills, resources, or experiences?
Yeah, I would just build a little bit. I would totally agree with the leadership, you know, putting yourself in positions when you're on teams to take more of a leadership role. I think many of the positions that I held over time were because of my ability to lead groups of people, handle conflict, negotiate, interact with people, as Dr. Thurston had said, from varying backgrounds, and listening to varying points of view, and then being able to sort of synthesize that into a direction. And so I think that leadership and project management, which I think coincides with what she said, both were really strong skills that I think help set you apart when you first particularly when you're first getting started. So putting yourself in situations where you can develop those, I think, would be helpful.
Awesome. Taking advantage of those opportunities. Dr. Messina, any additions?
Maybe just to generalize, to me was the diversity of experiences, and maybe remember something is about diversity, right? Diversity in all dimensions, right? It's gender diversity, skill diversity, thought, that when you experience those, then you can adapt to new situations very easy. And that's a great skill, because when you're in an interview or trying to get a new job, they're hiring not only for what you can do today, but your opportunity to grow within that company or where you're going to go. So just remember that diversity, harness that diversity, whether it's teams or your own experiences, to build and think about your career.
Dr. Fletcher?
Yeah, sure. I think, you know, I echo what everyone has already shared. And, you know, something else I'll share is to not be afraid of a challenge. You know, my family, I think, has been a great resource. You know, major professors, again, Dr. Shanklin, I can't say enough wonderful things about her and the influence she's had on my life. But not being afraid of a challenge, there were times when I was thinking, do I really want to go to Memphis? I'm happy where I am. I'm in my comfort zone. And my family kind of gave me that nudge. And I'll share a quick story. When I was in Orlando, again, someone said, you should apply for this job in Richmond. And I'm thinking, I'm in Florida, I'm where I want to be. I don't want to move, but they really kept pushing. And I was at a national conference and was in a room with probably 500 people, me and my dad. And we went to a table and there was a gentleman there. And I just said to him, are you a food service director? What's your connection here? He said, no, my wife is, or she was, and I'm here with her. He said she used to be the food service director in Richmond, Virginia. And in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, oh, okay. And he was like, and they're looking for somebody, and I feel sorry for whoever gets that job. And I'm thinking to myself, like, God, is this you telling me? Because I didn't tell the gentleman that I was trying to get a job anywhere. So I'm thinking, wow, do I even need to apply for this job? And they had some situations that were a little bit difficult, but I still applied for the job anyway, and got it. And there were some challenges, but great staff, and it was all worth it. I think with the team, we were able to turn some things around, but I think most people would have probably have taken that as some kind of premonition, like, don't go. Out of 500 people, you meet this gentleman who's saying, I feel sorry for whoever gets the job, but I took it anyway. And it was a great challenge. So not being afraid of challenges, go for it. That's what getting all that graduate education teaches you. So if anybody can do it, you can. So having confidence in yourself.
Awesome, thank you. All right, our next question for anyone of our panelists that's following in numbers, we're going to jump to number 10. And that question is, what challenges did you experience in pursuing your current or previous jobs, and how did you overcome that challenge? So we'll start with Dr. Thurston again this time. She looks ready.
Maybe you saw the panic in my eyes. No. So is it pursuing a job, or is it actually in your first job? So do you mean actually looking for a job?
So the question was phrased pursuing, but if you didn't have a problem pursuing, maybe talk about a challenge that was in your first job. We'll take any advice.
Okay, so like I said, I'll kind of handle both ways of the question. But so in pursuing it, I started looking for jobs probably 6 months, so maybe that's too late before graduation. I was graduating. I just happened to be at a time when my skills, there was quite a few opportunities. So I was lucky there, but I didn't necessarily only look for jobs. So one of the things I wanted to mention, permanent full-time jobs. So I looked for permanent full-time jobs. I looked at postdocs. I also looked at national fellowships. And so there's a lot of different opportunities. And because of my time, oh, my computer just died again. Can you hear me? Okay, my screen keeps turning off. So if I, oop, there it went again.
We can flip to somebody else and let your computer figure it out.
Yeah, I just can't see, as long as you can.
Yeah, we can see and hear you, yeah.
Okay, it's back on again. Now it's over here though. So what I was gonna say is also my experience at the National Institute of Food and Agriculture, depending on what you wanna do, whether it's in research, whether it's science policy. So if you're interested in science policy, there's these AAAS fellows, policy fellows that are fantastic opportunities if what you want to do is science policy. So think outside the box. You don't only have to get a postdoc after getting your PhD. There are other opportunities available too, depending on what your areas of interest are. And as far as starting my first job, so I didn't do a postdoc. I went right into a permanent full-time position. And so I had to start up my own research lab. And like today, the education's a lot better than when I was in school. Maybe I'm dating myself, but there was no course on lab budgeting, managing people, or setting up a lab or anything like that. So that was kind of baptism by fire for me. But it was a fantastic experience. And so if you can get any of that kind of experience while you're in grad school, that would be really useful. Maybe talk to your major professor about how he or she is managing the budget and how, making decisions as far as purchasing and managing people, or if there's training that you can take. The city program here at K-State has some really fantastic training, which maybe you've already taken. But some of them, for example, the responsible conduct of research, I assume most people probably have taken it, but if you haven't, it's some really fantastic training that I guarantee you, even if you don't do research, there is good material in there that you'll be using for the rest of your career. So take a peek at that. But yeah, so the challenge for me was there was a lot of responsibility that I had in leading my own lab that I didn't actually learn in graduate school. So that was a challenge. Obviously overcame it thanks to really good colleagues where I worked and leaned on other people and found a mentor. So that's something I guess we haven't touched upon either, is finding really strong mentors, both within the organization that you're going to be working for, but then also outside of the organization. I personally find that very helpful. I want you all to know that I still have mentors to this day. Matter of fact, I've just identified 3 new ones for my current position. So those are folks that you can always lean on to help provide an unbiased opinion about a situation that you're tackling.
Awesome, thank you. Dr. Gregoire, do you have anything about challenges in pursuing your current career and how you overcame them?
Yeah, I think one of the challenges, I was married at the time, and I still am, but at the time I was finishing my doctorate. So, and then every position that I held after that it wasn't just, where is Mary going to go? It's, is this good for our family? And will my husband have a position? Now, I was very fortunate. My husband is a pharmacist. I think they might have mentioned that. And he worked for a large national chain of pharmacies. And although we lived in about, 6 or 7 different areas of the country throughout my career, he was always able to transfer with the company and had a position. So we were very fortunate in that. But I do think that is a piece, at least it has been as part of my career, and not only, when positions come available that I think would be exciting, but then really taking a look at, will this be good for the family? The other piece I think I found as a challenge, since I did move between a lot of different positions over time, is when you're first getting there is making all of those new contacts. When you're working on your doctorate, someone who can help you with stats, you know who to call for various things. And so I think when you first get into a new position, one of the challenges is really starting to make those contacts again, thinking about, who were the people that you worked with, and what kinds of expertise do you really not have that you need that additional help with, and then trying to find those people in that new position, whether it's an academic or a non-academic kind of a position. So those would be my 2 things.
Awesome, thank you. Dr. Messina?
Yeah, that's a key. Mentors that help you know the new space and find people that can help you. That's key. The other, I would say, maybe persistence a little bit. I tend to maybe trying to do things that maybe funding agencies find things too risky. So sometimes it's a little bit of being patient and persist. Some other times is write the proposals. Sometimes is find another institution that may be willing to take that risk. And the story was I graduated, there was no jobs. So I write my proposals to create the space. NSF wasn't happy with it, but Corteva was happy. So again, go and create your own space, if you will. And that's how you can try to overcome that challenge. Own your path to that future.
Dr. Fletcher. Thank you. Dr. Fletcher, do you have anything about challenges and overcoming it?
Yeah, I think definitely persistence is something that, we all need to do. I remember applying for a job at USDA, and I had always heard it could be difficult getting into the government, it could be a little challenging. And I applied for a position that I thought would be the perfect position for me. I thought with my nutrition background and my experience at the state and local level, that was definitely a job. And I didn't even get an interview. So I was crushed. I was like, how could I not even get an interview? So instead of just saying, okay, that didn't work out for me, I said, what can I do for the next opportunity? So I called and said, hey, I applied for this job, just want to get a little bit more insight on what you're looking for, or maybe what I didn't do quite right. And they provided some really good feedback about your resume, having that resume and it matching up with the questions and being able to support the questions that are on there. And that was so helpful for me, because had I not called, then I maybe would have continued to do the same thing over and over again. So it was really helpful. In the next position that I applied for was actually at a higher level, and I got it. So, being persistent, asking those questions, I think it is really important.
Awesome, thank you. Thank you for telling us a little bit about your application process for the USDA. I'm going to piggyback off that and direct a question at Dr. Thurston for this. It's the last question on your sheet. So what about the USDA swayed you away from academia? Was the USDA more or less transparent about the decisions they made as an organization when compared to other academic institutes that you worked with?
Okay, well, I think I've kind of answered the first part of that question. So again, for me, becoming an ARS, Agriculture Research Service scientist, was really the best of both worlds. I didn't teach, but to be honest, I wanted to focus on research, so that didn't break my heart. And I was on campus. I had I had graduate students. I was adjunct faculty. Anyway, it really was the best of both worlds. It was a fantastic beginning to my career. Now, as far as the more or less transparent about decisions, I've been at K-State for a year, and in my previous position at the National Institute of Food and Agriculture, of course, land-grant institutions are partners of the agency. And so what I'll tell you is that, it depends. It's really hard to make a blanket statement regarding one being more transparent than the other, because it's really going to depend on what we're talking about, what the issue is. And the truth is, in my very last position, I worked in the office of the director. And did I hear things before the rest of the agency? Yes, I did. Was I able to share those? No, I wasn't, for a wide range of reasons. So sometimes lack of transparency is because folks, maybe your supervisor, other folks' hands are just tied based on the circumstances of the issue that's not being shared at the moment. So that's a really hard question. I've been at K-State for a year. I've been really happy with the transparency in the College of Agriculture. I have a fantastic boss who's the dean, and I feel like I can ask him anything. But to be very honest with you, when I was at NIFA, the associate director for programs there was my supervisor, and I could ask him anything as well. And he was very honest and open and transparent about things that were going on in the agency. So again, as you slowly rise up the ladders in your career, you're going to understand that sometimes not everything can be shared, and sometimes there's really good reasons for that.
Awesome, thank you for that insight. All right, we'll go back to one of our other submitted questions. So, some students are not familiar with the types of jobs available outside of higher education. What recommendations do you have for them to learn more about the diverse employment opportunities available to master's and doctorate degree holders? So we'll start with Dr. Fletcher on this one.
I think there's so many tools available now and so many ways to network, but I think it's just going to be putting in the research, knowing what it is you like to do, and just researching. Now, you have the internet, and so there's so much information out there. So I definitely think using the tools that are out there, people I think reaching out to people, if there's something you think you want to do, or an organization you've looked into, reaching out to people. I had a young man who's reached out to me several times. He's interested in a career. He's been persistent, and, he'll just say, hey, just checking in again. And finally, he was like, can we just chat for a few minutes? And I was like, sure. He's really interested. He's shown that. So, we spent some time talking, And certainly, you know, there's a process to getting positions, but certainly this young man, you know, stands out to me. So just making contact and doing the research, I think, is really important.
Awesome, thank you. Dr. Gregoire, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, you know, in addition to that, I think when you look for positions, think about the skill sets that and the types of things that you want to do. Don't really look at job titles so much, I would say, as the kind of work you want to do and for positions that might offer that ability. I totally agree. The networking piece, I think, is critical. All of the positions I had throughout my career were because of people I knew through professional organizations or practice groups who then reached out to me and said, you know, we'd really like you to look at this position. We think you'd be really good for this position. You know, if your professional organizations have, in our profession, for example, there are what they call practice groups that focus on, you know, a broad variety of sub areas, I might say, that you might work in within the profession. And several of those are related to, well, not several, most of those are related to non-academic types of roles that people might have. So if you have similar things within your, so I first of all encourage you to become involved and participate in your professional organizations, you know, starting out at the local level, but it's making, just as I don't remember, I think maybe Dr. Thurston had mentioned about being on the review panels. Well, doing the same thing within the profession. For example, I started doing exam writing, and that put me in contact with people in the national office. And so there's a variety of ways I think you can become engaged, and through that engagement, you then meet people who might be very diverse, because often those groups that a national organization puts together to work on a task force or a project, they're bringing in across disciplines, and it gives you the opportunity to meet people that you might not have ever had the opportunity to meet, who could be well outside of areas of practice you'd ever even thought about. So those would be a couple suggestions.
Those are great, thank you. Dr. Messina, do you have any additional suggestions for looking for diverse employment opportunities?
I will emphasize participating of activities that are organized by students. For example, the plant symposia at Kansas State. That's where people converge from industry, and now you have your chance to talk, and they can refer to others, right? Talk to people, in addition to do the research, right?
Yes. Dr. Thurston, do you have anything to add?
Yeah. Well, I think all the advice you've gotten so far is excellent. Just a little bit of real specific advice. So if you're interested in a federal job, usajobs.gov is the place to go. And I know when I've been looking for career opportunities in the federal government, and now, you know, I think it was this, I forget whose point it was, about not being so specific, and I agree. So when you go, you know, the government is huge. There are so many, there may be an opportunity for you in an agency you've never even heard of, or maybe a department you never even considered. So when you go there, this is what I always did. Now remember my background, I'm a microbiologist. So when I would search, the search term I would use is bio with an asterisk. And now you have to have some time because it's going to bring up a lot of jobs. but it'll show you the whole gamut of opportunities, and then you can really tease out which ones are most exciting for you. But usajobs.gov. Someone else mentioned your professional societies. I agree 100%. But another one, if you're not already a member, is AAAS. They have a lot of good job opportunities posted as well. So if you're a member there. And then, you know, like your major professor is a fantastic source of positions, because I know in my last position and my position here at K-State, people already know who I am, I guess, because I'm getting positions all the time that are open in industry and federal government. And anyway, so your major advisor is always another really great source of information as far as opportunities.
Awesome, thank you. And it looks like Andrew dropped a little link in the chat for our K-State students that is for the Career Center, and also a plug for our graduate students that this week is the Career Fair week. So you can sit in on info sessions for companies. And I just want to encourage you guys all to do that. I sat in on a company I'd never heard of, and I'm actually interested in it. So look through the Career Center website, sign up on Handshake, and sit in on some of those information sessions. Okay, back to our questions. We will start, and someone has dropped in another link for that too. So great. All right, our next question is, what are the top 3 things you recommend that I do during graduate school to prepare for a career outside academia? So you guys have mentioned some things, but if you had to only say the top 3, what are the top 3 things you recommend I do during graduate school to prepare for a job outside academia? Does anyone want to go first of our panelists? No volunteers, and I'm going to call on Dr. Fletcher because she unmuted for half a second.
Okay, and these are some things I've jotted down, some things, you know, just for anything. I think these are some things you want to do. I think do more than what is expected, you know, being on those committees, that volunteer work, you know, those are things that help you grow. They look great. So, you know, do that. That stands out. You know, internship experience, always great. I think invest in getting a good resume or Vita, make sure, you know, that's what people see before they see you. So make that investment in that. I think as you're preparing for jobs, being mobile is really helpful. As you've heard from the panelists, you know, we've kind of been all over the place. So, you know, you can't just limit yourself to Mulberry, Florida. You know, you got to be able to go to different places that just open so many opportunities for you. And just, again, take risks, get out of your comfort zone. Even for me, I'll have to say, Kansas State was like the best experience ever for me. I wouldn't trade it for anything. But I went to Kansas State when I didn't know a soul in Kansas coming from Florida. But a message my mom taught me that always stuck with me was, you can do anything for a little while. So even some of the positions that you get, you know, you do what you need to do. It's not going to be forever. You know, once you're done, then you can move on to something else. But you can do anything for a little while, and that stuck with me forever. So, you know, just, you know, take that message with you when you're, you know, your first position may not be exactly what you want, but it's an opportunity to get you to where you want to be. So, you know, those are the words of advice that I would share.
Thank you. All right, Dr. Messina, your top 3 things you would recommend a grad student does to prepare for it.
Just take it serious that you're in your grad program to learn techniques, but more importantly, you are learning how to learn. So have examples to tell the people interviewing you that you know how to learn, because you may apply what you learn in grad school the first couple of years, but the world is changing so rapidly that really what will be left is your skills to learn how quickly. So I would say make sure that don't forget what you are in grad school for. That's your thesis is one example, right? Make sure you put examples and have it in hand when you're interviewing. The second I alluded before is diversity. You need to master how to harness diversity because that is going to help you either build teams in due time or be a team member that by bringing that diversity together, you will outcompete others. In industry, it's important, we are competing. In academia, too, you want your paper to be the first one, right? So if you're in a team that is diverse, you will trump others that are more homogeneous. So master that skill, and that requires moving around, do a little bit of everything, right? That's a really good advice for a little while. So make sure that you are the one who understands and develop that common language. And the third one, in the current world, I think knowing some sort of programming language or data analytics, we are moving full speed ahead on the digital era. So you need to be able to speak that language. So make sure you leave your grad school with some analytic toolkit under the belt, and have an internship to show that you can actually are proficient at it. So those probably are the 3 bits that I will advise you to consider. More philosophical ones, very practical the others.
Awesome, thank you. We need both philosophical and practical, so thank you. Dr. Gregoire?
Yes, some of what I had on my list that we've already heard, but a couple things that I would just point out. One is, and I talked about this earlier, about leadership and project management. And so really taking on those roles. And I have a couple books actually that I might suggest. One is Mark Sanborn's book that's titled, "You Don't Need a Title to Be a Leader." And I think that book really talks through that idea of what you can do even as a student and how you can start beginning to develop those skills, because no matter the position you take, the more you can demonstrate those skills on day one, the faster you will move up and out and across, and because you have those skills. The other book that I find really helpful is a book by a gentleman by the name of Tom Rath, and it's called Strength Finder. But it basically goes through and helps you pinpoint what are your strengths, and then how do you use those to your advantage? What are the areas you're not as strong in that maybe you can develop, and what you might need to do to develop those. But I think having a good understanding of who you are, what you do well, is also really important as you're going out and starting to sell yourself. And then the other one is the networking. I can't emphasize enough how important it is to be doing that already now, to be going to professional meetings, to be making those contacts, to use your major advisor to help introduce you to other people that are in the field and in the industry or in the areas you might want to go into. I think that will serve you well.
Awesome, thank you. And thank you for those book recommendations. We'll make sure we get those dropped in the chat too. Dr. Thurston, do you want to add anything?
Well, I think my three have already been mentioned, but just a couple things. So in my own background, I was raised in Tucson, Arizona, and talk about if I'd allowed geography to limit me, I wouldn't have gone all the way across the country to the East Coast. So never in a million years did I think I was going to end up in Lincoln, Nebraska. And so remember, I was used to daily highs in the winter, and it was cold to us, of maybe 50 degrees, which was really cold to me. And I went to Lincoln, Nebraska. Why? Because it was the opportunity. It was that challenge that you heard from Dr. Fletcher as well. So I agree with that I agree with that 100%, that should be one of the things you need to think about. And of course, I mentioned the importance of working in multidisciplinary teams. That goes back to Dr. Messina's comments about diversity. So diversity of experience, diversity, working with a diverse group of people. The lab that I worked in graduate school, not only did we have over 20 colleagues that were in graduate school at the same time as me, they were from all over the world. And let me tell you, we had fantastic potlucks. But you know, that multidisciplinary, diverse, broad experience is gonna really, really take you far. And I truly believe I was able to start that lab in Lincoln, Nebraska because of that vast experience that I had in graduate school. All the people I interacted with and all those contacts. Somebody brought up networking and contacts, and all those contacts. Some of those folks are still really good friends to this day that I call upon and ask for advice and so and so forth, or just talk about our families, right? And then the last one is just leadership and leadership skills. And Dr. Gregoire talked about that at length, so I won't continue that conversation, but yeah, StrengthsFinder is a good one. Even just knowing your Myers-Briggs profile will, I mean, truly that helps you understand how to communicate with others and how others view you and take you when you speak. And so as someone who's an I, I learned a lot about the E's and how best to communicate. So if you don't know what I'm talking about, please look up Myers-Briggs. That would be another tool in your tool belt in having effective communication and collaboration in the future.
Yes, awesome, thank you. Yeah, and Andrew dropped another link in the chat for us. He's doing my job for me, which is nice. That you can request your StrengthsFinders code if you haven't already done that here at K-State, and learn a bit about yourself. Being self-aware is extremely beneficial when you're looking for a job. Okay, so we'll move on to our next question, and that is, how does the application and interview process differ between academic and non-academic jobs? So we'll go in the same order again. Dr. Fletcher, you keep getting be the first one.
Well, my experience, my experience has primarily been in the non-academic arena. I do remember going to Florida State, and I did go through the process there. My major professors there really encouraged me to do that, and that was a great experience. All the meetings with staff and the presentation, that was great. My other experiences have not, they haven't been as in-depth, I think. You kind of go for an interview, maybe a second interview, but not as in-depth as that one. And again, my experience is very limited because I haven't really held a position in higher education. So I'll turn that one over to someone else to provide some additional information.
Dr. Gregoire, do you want to add to this?
Yes, so I've actually done both. And I think, excuse me, and I think the experiences are very different. So if you're looking at an academic position, first of all, they're going to expect a vita that really details your teaching, your research, any publications. And that vita, the longer you're in a career, the longer that vita gets to be. I don't know, I think mine's 30 some pages now. If you're looking at a non-academic position, they don't want to see all of that. They want 1 to 2 pages, succinct, that really details what your skill set is. Yes, they want to know what your education is, but they really are interested more in what kinds of things have you done? What can you demonstrate you know how to do? You've managed this kind of a budget. You have implemented this kind of a project. You have, and so really, if you're looking at non-academic, do some reading on doing resume writing and effective resume writing, because it is very different in what they're going to look for. And it's really the same thing in the cover letters. And so that's where it's really important to look at, and I think this point was already made earlier, but it's really important to look at what is the job looking for, and being sure you detailed, you've highlighted that in some way, you've played into that in the resume as well as in the cover letter. The interview process typically is very different as well. So in an academic position, as was indicated, you typically will, you'll meet with faculty, you'll meet with the department head, you may meet with the dean. You're typically going to be expected to do a scholarly presentation, and often now a teaching, to actually teach a class, to be able to show your abilities to teach in a classroom sort of situation. Typically that interview all goes on over a 1 or 2 day sort of period that you're on campus. Operational positions can be very different. Often you have to clear through HR first. An HR person might call, do the initial screening sort of, that may be an in-person, it may be on the phone, it may be now thing. Where passed on to whoever the hiring manager is. Typically in operational positions, you will meet with many fewer people, depending on what level of the position it is. You may just meet with the hiring manager. Above who the hiring manager is, and so that process is very different in and I think in non-academic positions or skill set, because when you come with a doctorate, they have an expectation that, well, you must know how to do have those things. you know, how many publications have you done already? What kind of presentations have you done? You know, have you done enough while you were a graduate student to show that you're probably a good investment, that you stand a good chance to hit the ground running? But I do think the two processes are very different, or my experiences at least were that applying for academic positions was different from applying for non-academic.
Awesome, thank you. All right, Dr. Thurston, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, so my experience was actually quite a bit different than Dr. Gregoire's, and it may be the difference in where we've worked. And so again, when I was at USTA, I worked for the Research, Education, and Economics mission area. And so those are, you know, Agriculture Research Service, NIFA, which is both the internal and external science agencies of the USDA. And so that may be the difference why my experience is going to be a little bit different. So when I interviewed for my first position at ARS, it actually was like a faculty interview. I had to give a presentation. I had to give the stereotypical CV. Of course, my CV was far from 30 pages at that time. It still isn't, Dr. Gregoire. So. But, you know, so it was very typical. And in fact, you know, that Agriculture Research Service research unit was at the university. And so faculty came in, and as far as I remember, I think faculty also chimed in on the interview process and provided input. So it was very much like a typical university interview. Now, of course, it wouldn't be typical of someone who had an appointment across research, education, and extension. So my interview was more like somebody who had 100% appointment in research. So those interviews, even in academia, your interview is going to be very different depending on the appointment that you're applying for. So that's one thing. And that was true actually at the National Institute of Food and Agriculture. That's the other piece. So when I went to National Institute of Food and Agriculture, remember my job was going to be very different. I was leaving research behind, at least doing the research myself behind. And it was more science policy. But again, I still had to get up and give a presentation and actually talk about the impacts. And so the one thing that I think I've neglected to mention that's really important to you all, no matter whether you stay in research or you're going to be doing teaching or you're going to go into science policy or other areas, is being up to date on what's going on in the world. And so that was incredibly important, that I understood the priorities across the federal government, you know, what academia was saying, what the science priorities were. Those things were incredibly important during my interview at the National Institute of Food and Agriculture. But, you know, both interviews were pretty similar to what I experienced here at K-State. You know, my position here at K-State, I don't have a teaching appointment. It's an administrative appointment. I'm the director here in the Food Science Institute. So my interview here is very, very similar to what I experienced when I went to the National Institute of Food and Agriculture.
Awesome, thank you. Dr. Messina, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I'm from industry, so I can relate to Dr. Gregoire's comment, and it depends in which part of the organization you're going to work. So all the applications go online, and HR will be the first group to look at it. If the positions are more operational, HR will have a more influence than if they are on research. And you will find the two type of interviews, as Dr. Gregoire mentioned. On the operational, they want to know that you are going to be ready right there. If you are in a research group like mine, I will look at the CV like if you're interviewing for a university. I will look at your publication record. I want to know if you can read, if you can write, if you can express your thoughts, if you are a scientific thinker, and the interview will be similar. It will be how you're going to go about to solve a problem. And so of course, you will have to give a seminar, and you will probably interview throughout the whole day with people that will be working with you, maybe my supervisors, who have an idea of what are you getting into, because the interviews it's a two-way conversation here. It's a two-way dialogue, right? It's not just for the company, whether you're a good fit for the company and the team, but it's for you to figure out what you're getting into, whether you really want to work in that group. Because maybe you read on the job description, looks great, but when you start talking with people, say there's not a chance I'm going to work for this individual, this company, the mission is totally wrong. So I think it's really important in the interview process, take it seriously, is for you to ask questions. And we are expecting you to ask questions, because if you don't, we are not sure if you really like and you're passionate about taking the position too, right? So maybe maybe a little bit of advice on how to interview here, but do your homework, as Dr. Hua says, put the effort. It's nothing worse than when I receive CVs or resumes that they don't even put the time to match their skill set to what the position is asking. That resume is doomed to go in the pile of no's right away. This person has showed no interest in this position. And the problem is for a person that does that is that maybe another 20 that they actually did the homework. So when you rank, this is also, it's not just an absolute score, it's a relative score, right? You're competing with other people that if they do the homework, they'll put you out of business on the interview process. So be really diligent on putting in your cover letter why you're really good for the position, why you're passionate, and do the homework, really. What this company is about, where is the context that this agricultural sector is facing. Again, show that you have an understanding beyond your immediate technical area. So again, depending on where you're heading, do your homework is a must. And then depending on the area, you may be looking at more operational type of interview, or you can be almost like a position in academia, 100% appointment in research. So that you can find all the spectrum in Corteva.
Awesome, thank you. And Andrew also dropped a link that the Career Center put together about industry resumes. And we also offer some resume review appointments. So take advantage of that, guys. All right, I'm going to try to fit in another question or two here right at the end. So are there any barriers to conducting research in non-academic careers? So we'll start with Dr. Fletcher.
I see. Well, I think it depends on the position, in the current position and the other positions that I've had at USDA. Those were positions where research wasn't something that was required. So, but there are other positions in USDA where you can do research, like Dr. Thurston mentioned. So I think it just depends on the position and what the requirements are for the job. So I will say it depends. For me, that hasn't been something that has been a requirement or something that I needed to do. There may be people on my team who may do some data analytics and that type of thing. But overall, where I sit, research is not something that, it's really on my plate.
Dr. Gregoire, do you have anything?
No, I would totally agree. I have been in positions where it wasn't part of my job description, and I've tried to do research, working with graduate students and it really does fall in that, nights and weekend kind of time frame, because if it's not part of your job, an expectation to do it, you'll find that you've got so many other demands on your time that trying to find time to do it becomes really difficult.
Dr. Messina?
Yeah, I relate to that. That's in your interview, ask the question, what is that job description exactly? So if you're really interested to do research, make sure you have the resources and the time to do it. Otherwise, it will be really difficult to happen.
Dr. Thurston?
Yeah, I agree with everything that's been said. And I just want to say, Dr. Messina, your comments as far as asking questions and doing your homework, I agree with you 100%. I've seen situations, so I'm taking us a little off base, but I just wanted to follow up and emphasize those comments. I've seen situations where we have someone, this was at the National Institute of Food and Agriculture, we have someone who's, you know, nationally recognized coming in for a national program leader position, for example, who didn't do their homework. And while their resume or their CV is fantastic, you know, they end up losing the job because they didn't do their homework. They didn't know the questions they asked. They didn't know the agency or the position they were applying for. So anyway, I just wanted to emphasize that, Dr. Messina. Those are fantastic piece of advice for everyone. So yeah, so my very first position, I was a research microbiologist. So that was my core job. And so as far as, well, the budget, so I think the budget's more of a problem nowadays with continuing resolutions one after the other. But even in those situations, your federal scientists still have a portion of their funding to be able to go forward with their research. One of the things I'd like to say, now I can't speak for all research agencies, I can only speak for the one that I worked for. You know, again, it was a fantastic experience for me. And, you know, if you've heard of the 80-20 rule, that's what was applied, at least where I was in ARS, which means 80% of my time was really focused on mission critical areas of research that I was hired for. I had another 20%, according to my boss, to be able to, I mean, it still had to be related. I couldn't do, you know, underwater, you know, basket weaving, you know, for my other 20%. But I was able to actually do side areas of research that maybe another interest of mine that weren't directly aligned with the mission. So, you know, there's sometimes there's rules. There's a lot of rules in the federal government. I think here in academia from, you know, I've been here a year now, it's a lot more flexible in a university environment. But what I can tell you is during my, I guess, 8 years at ARS, I never, well, I shouldn't say never. I think there was one time where I got a little bit of pushback from a national program leader in Washington, D.C. about the research I was doing. And it was because that research leader didn't know anything about the work. And so this is going back to making sure you're having mentors and making sure you're communicative. And it happened to be that I had a very close working relationship and made sure my boss always knew what I was doing and the importance of what I was doing, as well as my colleagues. And so the pushback came from here, the Midwest, back to DC, and I was able to follow through with that research. But that's the only time in my career with ARS where I had a little bit of a hiccup, but it all worked out because of good communication, making sure people understood the importance and the impact of the work that I was doing.
Awesome, thank you. All right, we're gonna wrap up by just asking each of our panelists to just talk about whatever they feel like they didn't get to mention that would be of use to our graduate students. So we'll do one last go round and then I'll close this out with a couple reminders and some thank yous. So Dr. Fletcher, any last thoughts, comments, or words of encouragement?
Again, I think that the panel's done such a terrific job of sharing a lot of great information. You know, I think some common themes are, again, you know, doing your homework, you know, being open to new experiences and new challenges. I think that just broadens the opportunity. And I think just being passionate about what you're doing, I think are all really, really important points. So, you know, I just wish you all luck. Doesn't seem like so long ago that I was a graduate student, but just be persistent. Whatever you do, do a great job and be passionate about it.
Awesome, thank you, good advice. Dr. Gregoire?
Yeah, I don't know that I have anything additional to what I've said, but I wish you all luck. It's an exciting time to be in graduate school and looking at possibilities for what typically might be a career shift from what you did before you came into graduate school. So I wish you all the luck, and I look forward to the day I can be back on campus to see everyone again.
Awesome, thank you. Dr. Messina?
Yeah, same. I wish you great success, and I would say follow what you're passionate about. That will make your life so much easier and enjoyable. And don't hesitate to ask for help. People are really willing to help others, and I got many opportunities where people help me, and I'm willing to pass that along. So if you need us for help, and do what you're passionate about.
Awesome. Thank you for being here and for sharing your passion with us. Dr. Thurston, any last words?
Yeah, so I got great advice from my dad. So before I decided to become a microbiologist in my undergrad, I was actually going to nursing school, which is actually funny in itself because I can't stand the sight of blood. But anyway, but you know, he sat me down. I took a microbiology class and he sat me down and I loved it, by the way. Microbiology, oh my gosh. I was so excited. I'd be ear to ear when I would talk about it, straight A's. I mean, so excited, study my buns off. And my dad sat me down, and of course I was in nursing school, remember. My dad sat me down and he looked at me, he said, Jeanette, he said, you know, I see you come home every day. You're so excited about microbiology. You know what? You're gonna end up spending, and this is true, you're gonna end up spending more time in your job than you are gonna be at home. And he said, it is critically important, Jeanette, that you love what you do, or at least at the very least, like what you do. So that goes back to that passion, but I think you've heard passion from every single one of the panelists here today. So if you can find that passion, gosh, go for it. You know, your job is so very important. It's important to your overall quality of life. And so, so anyway, I agree with everything that's been said today. And you know what? I'm actually here at K-State. So I'm in 216 Call Hall. And so if ever you want to chat and talk about, you know, your career possibilities, or if there's people you want to meet at USDA, and if I can make those connections, I'd be happy to.
Awesome. Thank you for being so willing to help our graduate students. So just one last thank you to all of our panelists. If anybody, our grad students want to drop a thank you in the chat, or just give our panelists a round of applause with reactions, that'd be great, because we're very thankful for your all's participation. So thank you. And then reminder to all of our graduate students that if you are hoping to earn our Graduate Student Council Professional Development Certificate, that you do in fact complete the follow-up survey for this event that you will be getting in the next couple of days. So if you're trying to earn that certificate, make sure you fill that out. And if you don't know anything about the GSC Professional Development Certificate, I encourage you guys to go look at the website. You can just Google K-State Grad Student Council Professional Development and it'll pop up. And so with that, we are just gonna say thank you and end our panel discussion, and hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your week.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank
everybody.
you,
Take
everyone.
care.
Bye-bye.